It's great to be here. I want to start with a question before I go 100 miles an hour. But my question to you is either by show of hands or by, if you're not on the screen, which is totally fine, you could use that thumbs up button or whatever, or thumbs down. How many of you have experienced anti-Semitism? Okay. Next question. How many of you view anti-Semitism as a big deal? As a real, if you were to, before you answer, big deal needs to be, we need to define what that means a little bit. Would you say it's one of the most important priorities of the Jewish people? Or is it not a top 5 priority? How would you describe it? Top 5, raise your hand if you say top 5. Okay. By the way, can everyone see me? I don't know if I'm in a small box for everyone or if I'm highlighted or not. I'm not sure, but let me know, because I'm just moving around on the screen itself. But okay, so there we are. Hey, there it is. Okay, so and I'll move around to make sure on the top of the screen that I'm able to see different faces and I'll ask different questions. So I'm gonna share my screen. And I want to talk about a topic that is, I would say, probably to most people quite depressing on the one hand, and on the other hand, and you'll hear me say that a lot, on the other hand, I think that we're probably viewing it in the wrong way. On the one hand, I want to argue that anti-Semitism is the biggest problem in the world for the Jewish people today. And on the other hand, I don't see that to be the case in the slightest. On the one hand, I think we should be focusing a lot of our energies on anti-Semitism. And on the other hand, I think that we really, really shouldn't. On the one hand, I think it is the absolute best time in the world to be Jewish. In a history, perhaps, of all time, right now, 2023, to be a Jew. I mean, is it 1783? Is that a better time? I'm saying random dates right now. Is it 1543? Is it the year 3? Is that when it is? I would argue that now is very much so the ideal time, the best time to be born a Jewish person. We have Medinat Yisrael, we have the Jewish state. We have unbelievable amount of thriving in this world. And on the other hand, we represent 2% of the United States population and over 60% of religious hate crimes. On the other hand, 53% of Jews feel less safe than they did 5 years ago in the United States of America. There was a study that was done of university students, of college students, where of all API students, and 70% reported anti-Semitism. 50% hide their Jewish identity on college campuses. And I changed the title because I didn't want to be jerky, but the title initially was The Dialectic of Anti-Semitism Today. But I changed it to Exploring Anti-Semitism Today to be more of a human being about it. But that is really what we have. It's a massive dialectic. And I'll show you how serious I am about this. Dr. Shore was talking about earlier. We have produced, one of the main things that we do is we have a YouTube channel where we believe that every single Jewish person in the world has a right to Jewish education, a birthright to Jewish education. Okay. And as a result of that, we have all these different platforms and TikTok and Instagram and full-time people on all of these different platforms. We have 3 different YouTube channels. Our legacy YouTube channel is called Unpacked. And on this Unpacked channel, I asked my team to put together as many videos as we have on anti-Semitism. And I think you should watch all these videos. It's on Unpacked. You can find them all. I can tell you which are my favorite, which they're incredibly important topics about the Hebrew Israelites, about questions about can Jews be anti-Semitic, questions about Jews and wealth, questions about Jewish noses. We explore it all. There is no topic that is so sacrosanct that we say we are not going to go there. We want to educate about anti-Semitism. And there's a very funny thing that happens in the world of the philosophy of anti-Semitism, and it happens to fall out during this time period between Shiva Asar B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av. A time period that is described, and it was in your email, as an inauspicious time period. A time period that is described by our sages as perhaps some of the most superstitious time in which we don't even engage, not that it's a law, but we don't even engage in potentially precarious or dangerous positions, whether it's travel or the like. My mom, who's on the call, doesn't like that I travel as much as I do in general, but the reality is we do less and less travel. It is an inauspicious time period. But there's something else that happened in this time period between Shiva Asar B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av. Not all the crazy events that you saw in the email, the world events, but the two of the greatest Zionist figures died during the time period between the 17th of Tammuz and the 9th of Av. And those two different Zionist philosophers, one is known as, his name is Theodor Herzl, who died on the 20th of Tammuz 3 days ago, and it's now the 23rd of Tammuz, and someone who is described as his disciple, Jabotinsky, who died on the 29th of Tammuz. And it is during this inauspicious time period that these two great thinkers and leaders passed away. And it is during this time period that we are able to ask a fundamental question about anti-Semitism. And Herzl and Jabotinsky had this really riveting intellectual debate. This was a debate. Herzl believed that the purpose of a Jewish state is to eradicate anti-Semitism. He believed, that's why the Uganda plan, we made a video on that, I hosted that, you can watch that. Uganda plan proves that his issue was dealing with the travails, the ever-present anti-Semitism that was so prevalent and inescapable, so much so that his first solution to the Jewish problem was mass conversion of the Jewish people. That's how awful it was. And it was before the Holocaust, let's remember. And he believed, his philosophy was, if we have a Jewish state, that will end anti-Semitism. His disciple Jabotinsky said, no. It is not the case at all that it will end anti-Semitism, but rather a Jewish state will protect against anti-Semitism. Two different worldviews on anti-Semitism. And it's very easy to be a Monday morning quarterback and to say, well, Herzl, you're just a dreamer. So nebuch, so sad that that's what you thought, how wrong you were. And that's the dialectic that we keep on thinking about within the world of anti-Semitism. Here are some questions I want to explore with you. Here's what I want to accomplish with you. My goal for today, for this lecture, and a huge thank you to Julian, a huge thank you to Milena, a huge thank you to Dr. Shore for giving me this opportunity to learn with you about anti-Semitism and about Jewish identity, really. And here are the goals that I have with you. Number one, I want to explore a fascinating, if I may call it that, and a deadly phenomenon. I want to explore it a little bit with you. I want to provoke a thought or two. I want to make sure that you come out with, like, I never enjoy giving lectures where people are like, oh, now I feel so good about everything. I am much more interested in provoking a reaction, provoking a thought, provoking an emotion, and hopefully giving you some menuchat hanefesh as well, some solace as well. And then at the end of this, I'd love to have some clarity on how our articulation and our exploration can enhance this particular time period, this time period that is between the 17th of Tammuz and the 9th of Av. Here are my questions. My questions are, do you think the focus on anti-Semitism is overblown? Do you think it gets too much attention, not enough attention? Something to think about. If I was with you in a room, I would go from person to person, but you could put pen to paper, you could put your mind on it. What do you think? Second question I have is, what are the different types of anti-Semitism? Number three that we'll explore is, why is anti-Semitism particularly dangerous? And number four is, what does this all mean for the Jewish communities, our Jewish communities that we live in? So let me start with a little bit of humor, because that's fun, right? I don't know if you've seen this, but this is Tom Lehrer. And this is a song that I was playing in the background as I was, doing my research on anti-Semitism as one does. And my son Eyal was listening to this, and so it wasn't the best parenting moment. But listen on.
Oh, the white folks hate the black folks, and the black folks hate the white folks. To hate all but the right folks is an old established rule, but during National Brotherhood Week, see Cassius Clay and Mrs. Wallace dancing cheek to cheek. It's fun to eulogize the people you despise, as long as you don't let them in your school.
Get ready. Get ready.
Oh, the poor folks hate the rich folks, and the rich folks hate the poor folks. All of my folks hate all of your folks. It's American as apple pie. But during National Brotherhood Week, New Yorkers love the Puerto Ricans 'cause it's very chic. Step up and shake the hand of someone you can't stand. You can tolerate him if you try. Oh, the Protestants hate the Catholics, and the Catholics hate the Protestants, and the Hindus hate the Muslims, and everybody hates the Jews. But during National Brotherhood Week, it's National Everyone Smile at One.
And we watch that and we're like, lol, on the one hand, and on the other hand, and it's obviously a joke, I think. And but there is that sentiment that it's seeped into comedy, so much so that because it's such an ever-present feeling that many people have. And I was thinking about some stories. I'll stop sharing for a second. I'll come back to this in a second. But I was thinking about some stories of my experience both at Beth Phila and my experience going from community to community across the globe and speaking. And just a few stories that stand out to me. And we'll get to all the intensity, I assure you. One is a story with Dr. Shore. Dr. Shore probably does not remember the story, but I remember it. I was in high school at Friday Assembly, and I wanted to start a new club. And the new club I wanted to start was, I called it Yid of the Week. I thought it would be great. What a cute idea. Jew of the Week, like a mitzvah person of the week, right? Dr. Shore, I announced it, and as is Dr. Shore's way, dear. We're not calling anything Yid of the Week. I was like, why not? I don't get it. It's anti-Semitic. I'm anti-Semitic. Zid, Yid and Zid are very close to each other. So we changed it to Mensch of the Week. That's what we changed it to. But there is a sensitivity that we all have. I'll give you another story. That's just like the sensitivity that we have. But when I was playing soccer, when I was the captain of the soccer team and the basketball teams, and captain my junior year. And my junior year on the soccer field against Towson Catholic, as I'm on the field, and we're going at it. Soccer, you're going at it. You're very far away from the refs. And I still remember this because I thought it was the nerdiest anti-Semitic moment I've ever had in my life, where we're getting into it, and this kid on the team starts jawing at me and saying the following: "Why don't you go wander somewhere? Why don't you go wander like your ancestors?" I was like, that is the most biblical joke, anti-Semitic moment ever. Like, wandering, that's what you're calling me out for? But there was still this question always: do we wear the kippah? Do we not wear the kippah? That's the type of feeling that we all had to different degrees. I just went to LA a few months back, and I went to a middle school. I wasn't expecting this. I said, how many of you experience real anti-Semitic moments? And I want to say 90% of the hands went up. And this is middle school in LA. I was blown away by this. So what are these different types of anti-Semitism? What do these look like? So I'll go through that in a second. There are 4 different types of anti-Semitism. I'll share my screen again. 4 different types of anti-Semitism. Now there are more than that, but the 4 that we'll go over, and some of this is based on Deborah Lipstadt's work: obvious anti-Semitism, clueless anti-Semitism, dinner party anti-Semitism, and we'll call it Israel anti-Semitism. So obvious anti-Semitism is obvious stuff. It's the Tiki Torch stuff. It's the Poway stuff. It's the Jersey City stuff, the Tree of Life stuff. You know it when you see it. So it's beyond obvious anti-Semitism. Most people are not in the world of obvious anti-Semitism. Then there is the clueless anti-Semitism. If any of you remember Myers Leonard, who was playing on the Miami Heat, he was playing a video game and he said the K word a number of times. And he had no idea what he was saying, and he was punished pretty intensely for that. The third type of anti-Semitism is dinner party anti-Semitism. Dinner party anti-Semitism is, and this is the number one rule, someone who feels a need to boast that she has Jewish or Black friends is more often than not someone who has problems with Jewish people or Blacks who aren't her friends. And an example of dinner party anti-Semitism, I'll read it to you from Deborah Lipstadt, is she was describing Princess Diana versus Prince Charles. And listen to this, because you have to like, it's good to understand this and to really be nuanced about it. This is the description from the Telegraph, which is a conservative newspaper out of the UK. It became clear almost immediately, and I'm reading from the Telegraph, that the incompatibility of the Prince and the Princess of Wales stretched even to the solicitors they had employed. The Prince, as expected, had chosen the bridge-playing Fiona Shackleton, who's 39 years old, who had also represented the Duke of York in his separation agreement. She adopts a conciliatory approach. Unfortunately, referring to Diana's lawyer, her softly approach is at odds with the more bullish attitude of the princess's solicitor. Anthony Genius Julius, 39, is not a divorce lawyer, but a specialist in media law, acting for Robert Maxwell, and once employed by the Daily Mail. His background, pay close attention here, could not be further from the upper-class world inhabited by his opposite number. He is a Jewish intellectual and labor supporter, and less likely to feel constrained by considerations of fair play. At the end, he says, I'll get lots of money out of them. That's what a Cambridge Don taught them. And then she says, pretty impressive, in a few sentences, the Telegraph managed to slur Jews, members of the middle class, and people with liberal political views. That is dinner party anti-Semitism. That is the nature of it. Another just fascinating statistic is, and it's more dangerous and obvious anti-Semitism, 5.4% of people in the UK had strong anti-Semitic views, but 30% believed strong stereotypes about anti-Semitism, and that's at dinner party anti-Semitism. And then the Israel anti-Semitism, and this is a whole separate lecture, and I encourage you to watch our video, is when is criticizing Israel anti-Semitic. But I'll leave it with this one sentence. If every single people has a right to a state, and the one people that doesn't have a right to exist is the Jewish people, that is anti-Semitism, in my opinion. And I want to say in my opinion, because different people disagree on these things, and that's okay. That I have a couple slight variations of that. If there are some like hyper, I want to describe it as an extreme left world, maybe people who don't believe in boundaries and peoples in general, and they don't believe that anyone should have a nation state, then okay, then we'll call that something else. Or if it's within the Jewish camp, if it's referring to the Satmars and things like that, that's a different sort of story, in my opinion. But believing that every single people should have a country, except for one people, that is, and promoting that agenda, that sort of agenda is a type of anti-Semitism. So we have all these different types of anti-Semitism that we all experience in different sort of ways, with the obvious ones being the least common and the thing that we're most scared of. But here's why I want to talk about why anti-Semitism is so dangerous, with five different perspectives. One is the horseshoe theory, one is the political baton, one is conspiracy theory, one is it hurts the hater, and the other is it hurt people can hurt people. And so I'll go into that. So the first is the horseshoe theory. The horseshoe theory is super duper interesting. Both the supreme leader of Iran's Islamic theocracy and Robert Bowers, who was the Pittsburgh shooter, who hated Muslims, posted memes on social media alleging Zionist control of American politics. During the 2016 presidential race, supporters at campaign events for both Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders were captured on tape claiming that Zionists run America's finances. So it's a fascinating thing that we see. This is called the horseshoe theory, where the extremes, for some reason, meet. And that is number one danger. Number two danger is the political baton. Jews are way too often used in political struggles. The best example right now is obvious, and I'm not giving a political opinion, I'm just describing how it's being talked about in the media. You have Putin and Zelensky, both equally, or not, I don't say equally, but claiming that there is strong anti-Semitism emerging from each of their societies. And the Jewish person, is caught in this political battle. And it's so bad for the Jewish person because there's one person that benefits the most from using the Jewish person as a political baton. And that person is the anti-Semite. David Nierenberg in the New Yorker wrote, "It's dangerous if on the right of the political spectrum, we think that only the left is anti-Semitic because of their critique of Israel. And if on the left, you think that only the right is anti-Semitic because of white nationalism. The real danger is imagining that it is only the other where anti-Judaism is doing its work and thereby not being able to see it in your own community." What happens with using the Jewish person as a political baton is it totally removes myself from the equation from solving this issue, and it absolves myself fully. And then the Jewish person suffers and the anti-Semite wins. That's a dangerous prospect. The third is conspiracy theories. I'm not trying to say that every conspiracy theory is, shouldn't be believed. However, it is important to know that anti-Semites are very often drawn to conspiracy theories. And why are conspiracy theories so darn dangerous? Conspiracy theories are really dangerous because it is having bad reasons grounded in poor evidence, which has already been refuted, and nevertheless sticking to it. It's people who have access to evidence that undermines their theories. They believe in their theory even in the face of clear evidence, and that is incredibly dangerous. What Cass Sunstein described conspiracy theories as informationally isolated and a crippled epistemology. When you have someone who is obsessed with a conspiracy theory, and the greatest conspiracy theory all time is anti-Semitism, not that it exists, but the concept that the Jewish person is manipulating everything, that is the ultimate conspiracy theory. So when we find people that are drawn to conspiracy theories, and I'm not saying that some conspiracy theories are not accurate. Of course, there are some that are, and people are fascinated by conspiracy theories. Just a side note, when we look at our 280 pieces of content plus that we produce on YouTube, it's fascinating to see how much people are drawn to the videos that have conspiracy theory exploration in them. People were drawn to that. We want to be suspicious. But it's dangerous when there was a poll that was done in 2008 and 16,000 people across the world, fewer than half believe the official explanation of 9/11. I mean, it's a scary thought. So anti-Semitism, that could very often happen with anti-Semitism. It's the ultimate conspiracy theory. The fourth danger of anti-Semitism is from Walter Russell Mead. He points out that people who think that the Jews run the banks lose the ability to understand, much less operate financial systems. People who think the Jews dominate business through hidden structures can't build or long maintain a successful modern economy. And what Walter Russell Mead, the great American academic, points out is that emancipation from anti-Semitism is one of the necessary steps that many individuals and cultures have to take before they are able to act effectively and participate meaningfully in contemporary life. So it hurts the hater a lot. And the other reason it's so dangerous is I think it's the case that, this doesn't happen all the time, but there's a concept that hurt people. And the more the Jewish people are pushed to the brink, the more the Jewish people are not going to be willing to tolerate being pushed to the brink. And that's something we have to think about that. But that's why it's so dangerous. These are 5 reasons that I really think are so dangerous. The horseshoe theory, the political baton, the conspiracy theory hurts the hater, and hurt people can potentially hurt people. So I want to answer two more things that I posed. One is, where should I turn? And the other is, what should I take away from this? And then I want to do Q&A. So where should I turn? I put three things. Number one is the YouTube channels Unpacked and Today Unpacked. I think everyone's got to be super educated about all of this, incredibly educated. The second thing I want to point out is Sapir Journal, for a few reasons. One is my older brother, Hanan, is the director of the Sapir Institute, and they put out phenomenal content on, from an academic perspective, on big topics like this. And the third is Yair Rosenberg, who is a writer for The Atlantic. He has a newsletter called Deep Shtetl, and he wrote our 6-part series on anti-Semitism on YouTube. And he's just a phenomenal resource. Like I mentioned at the beginning, this is what it looks like. These are, go to Unpack, find all of our content there. And every single one of these topics is its own lecture. It's its own lecture. Can Jews be anti-Semitic? We could have its own lecture on that topic. You know, is anti-Semitism still relevant? All of these topics. Who are the fake Jews, right? People believe, there are people that believe that the Jewish people are not the real Jews, and that the Khazars, that the Jewish people are descendants of the Khazars. Okay, well, let's explore that. So here are my takeaways from today. Number one is a quote from Arthur Hertzberg, late rabbi, scholar, academic. He said, the only thing more dangerous than anti-Semitism is no anti-Semitism. Now, I don't want to agree with him, and I'm not saying I do agree with him, but I want to provoke and pose this problem. How often is it the case that the Jewish people come together? Well, Jewish people came together primarily in the last 30 to 40 years. What is the number one time that the Jewish people came together? This is audience participation. What is the number one time in the last 40 to 50 years that the Jewish people came together? Anyone want to guess? It's an easy one if you know the moment, and some of you were very around for it. The Free Soviet Jewry movement. The unification for the Jewish people to come together, to rally, to go to New York City. Whatever it was, a couple years ago, the anti-Semitism get-together in DC had a few thousand people. Can you imagine that? The Soviet Jewry movement was gigantic. We're doing a whole podcast episode. It's not even close. So Hertzberg was making a cynical comment, and the cynical comment is that we need anti-Semitism in order to feel more Jewish. But I would argue that that is a description, not a prescription. Rabbi Sachs says it even better. He says that, why is Lavan more challenging than Paro? He says Lavan did not afflict Yaakov. To the contrary, well, it's a fascinating point. To the contrary, while he was with Lavan, Yaakov grew rich. The danger was that he would remain with Lavan and forget who he was. So it has been throughout Jewish history. The more Jews suffered, the more they prayed, studied, and kept the commands. The paradox, says Rabbi Sachs, is that the danger to Jewish continuity has not been slavery and suffering, but affluence and freedom. So that's a really difficult thing for us to explore and to think about. What else can guide us to having a deep, thick Jewish identity? Does it have to come from the outside? A second thought I want to leave you with is a film that I made with my team and Shine a Light. If you heard of the Shine a Light campaign, we made a film, about a 3-minute film that I want to show you about Billings, Montana. And this is one of the 4 takeaways I want to leave you with. But watch this 3-minute film that we produced. It's got a few million views. Take a look.
It's not always easy to picture the American spirit. Sure, it's easy to see America on a map, or by traveling, or just looking at photos online. But the true American spirit can be harder to envision. So how do we create an image of the real America? Our rights are the frame on which the canvas is stretched. The canvas is our communities. The brush is our actions. And the paint? The paint is our values. The picture we create, that picture is the real America. If you want to see what the American spirit looks like, look no further than the town of Billings, Montana. Billings was founded in 1882 and saw rapid growth. Billings got the railroad and grew quickly into a distribution hub for all of Montana. Commerce, oil, and natural gas gave Billings what one might consider the quintessential American skyline. It's a beautiful painting, but it wasn't yet the perfect image of America. That day would come in 1993, and like many stories of greatness, it begins with ugliness. That year, Billings witnessed white supremacist groups moving into town. In the words of one reporter, spewing hate mail, death threats, and vandalism against Native Americans, blacks, and Jews. It's a story we know all too well. Just before the celebration of the Jewish New Year, the Jewish cemetery was vandalized. And that winter, during the Jewish Festival of Lights, Hanukkah, a brick was thrown through the window of a young Jewish boy's bedroom where his menorah was displayed. This kind of evil isn't new, but in Billings, they would not let it take root in their own town. The Billings Gazette printed a full-page menorah, and thousands of readers then cut it out and put it in their windows in an act of courage and solidarity. Billings had had enough with the hatred. They stood up against evil and painted a picture of what America really is, what America really stands for. This is what the American spirit looks like. The frame is made of our rights and freedoms, the canvas made of our community. The brushstrokes are our deeds. Paint is solidarity, tolerance, and brotherhood. The colors are red, white, and blue. A diverse community, Billings, Montana, came together to shine a light on anti-Semitism. That light dispelled the darkness of hate and illuminated the best of America. Join the movement to shine.
So that is a film that we made about the story of Billings, Montana. And the point on that one is, one of my takeaways is it's important, anti-Semitism, but it's also important to, while there is a midrashic concept that Esav soneh et Yaakov, that the Jewish people are hated by the descendants of Esav. It's also true that that doesn't have to be that way. It's not an ontological reality. And there are people, there are non-Jewish people who love Jewish people as well. And let's celebrate that. The third, and then I have one more thought. The third thought is from my dear friend, David Suissa, that I want to share. He's the editor-in-chief of the Jewish Journal in LA. He and I have been speaking about anti-Semitism for a long time. And he said, and he wrote this, and he said to me, we are creating a generation of angry Jews, one that defines its Jewish identity not by what it is for, but by what it is against. The irony is there is no evidence that this approach even works. We throw tens of millions of philanthropic dollars in the fight against anti-Semitism. We organize hundreds of seminars and panels. We write countless op-eds, and yet we continue to hear that anti-Semitism is still a growing problem. Perhaps, he says, it's time to invest more resources in another approach. Acknowledge that there will never be a cure for Jew hatred and develop a vaccine that will inoculate Jews. This vaccine, it turns out, Beth Phil does it very well, has been staring us in the face. It is Judaism itself. We need to inject more Judaism into more Jews. We need to create more happy Jews who will spend more time doing something positive than fighting something negative. Jews who value their Judaism are less vulnerable to Jew haters. They know who they are. Haters don't define them. But the haters get most of the attention, and for haters, that attention is like oxygen. We expose the haters, the media laps it up, and the cycle continues because fear sells. As a result, the fight against anti-Semitism in many ways defines the modern Jewish identity. We depend on the hate to feed the identity. We can aim higher, he says. Yes, we must never stop opposing evil. Activists, especially legal ones, must continue going after Jew-hating movements like BDS and defending Jews who feel threatened by this hatred. That goes without saying. But the pro-Judaism movement needs to make a lot more noise. And I don't mean just promoting Jewish pride. I mean disseminating more knowledge, more love for Judaism and its tradition. We don't need more education about Jew hatred. We need more education about Judaism. Let's flip the script when talking about anti-Semitism. Yes, let's talk about it. But we cannot allow young people to think of their identity as one that is wrapped up with everybody hates me. And I think that, to me, that's the ultimate point. Because the ultimate point is this. The ultimate point is, there's a great Hasidic saying. The saying is, as a brother is a brother, is a tate. The point is, are there going to be people that hate the Jewish people? For sure. But as a brother is a brother means when a brother is a brother, then a tate is a tate. Then God is very present. It doesn't matter what happens externally. You know who needs to learn a lot about anti-Semitism? Non-Jews. They really need to learn a lot about anti-Semitism. Of course, Jews do to an extent as well. Of course. But the key for our relationships, the key for our spiritual growth, the key for our Jewish identity is the 17th of Tammuz to the 9th of Av. How does that get solved? How do we deal with this infighting? The outside world is merely a distraction. That's all it is. It's a distraction for the Jewish people to solve what we need to solve. Because at the end of this 3-week process, the tradition has it that the 9th of Av turns into the ultimate day of joy. But the only way that the ultimate day of joy could exist and will come to fruition is as a brother is a brother, is a tate. If Jewish people are good to one another, if we develop healthy relationships with each other, if we're able to put these challenges, these differences, these really different views on politics and religion and all of these different issues to the side, as a brother is a brother, if a brother could be a brother, then a tate is going to be a tate. Then God's going to be our Father in heaven, and God's going to take care of what needs to be taken care of. And that's where the 9th of Av turns from this commemoration of the worst moment in Jewish history, of the worst moments of Jewish history, that the Jewish people have multiple calamities at the same time, and turns into this ultimate day of joy. And it's that process of the Jewish people coming together, ultimately, to work together, to live together, to have healthy relationships together, that's going to lead to Bimhera V'Yameinu, and hopefully very soon, this opportunity for Tisha B'Av to be the ultimate day of joy. So, those are my thoughts on anti-Semitism.
Amen.
Amen. Be happy to take questions on anything that I said. You could unshare me. You could unspotlight me. Also, it's getting I'm getting self-conscious anyway. My mother has a question. Yes, Ima.
How would you say we should go about educating non-Jews about anti-Semitism? Great job, Noam. Thanks.
So great question, Ima. I think that one of my most meaningful sessions that I've done is I went to Boston and presented at a non-Jewish school where you may have heard this in the news, where their football coach was fired because one of the plays that he called out, we would call out Auschwitz. He thought it was actually don't even whatever. He thought it was funny. So they brought me in to give a talk about anti-Semitism. What was fascinating about that experience, the most fascinating part, was the pre-assessment that I did with them. And the pre-assessment that I did with them was, I wanted to know if they even know what in the world anti-Semitism is. And a lot of them did not and could not identify what anti-Semitism is. And a lot of them did not and could not identify why those different examples that I went through, clueless anti-Semitism, dinner table anti-Semitism, everyone got obvious anti-Semitism, Israel anti-Semitism. They didn't understand it. They didn't feel it. They didn't see it. They have to be educated. They have to learn about this. It's and not in a way that's condescending in the slightest, but in a way that they can come to it. And we have to bring it more to public schools. That's actually a new initiative of ours at Open Door Media. We are now working with a number of non-Jewish schools to get our content on Holocaust education, anti-Semitism education, Israeli-Palestinian conflict education. We're working actually potentially with the Associated in Baltimore to do that with 1 or 2 schools in Baltimore as well. And that's how we have that conversation. But we should never assume that they just know that something is a problem or anti-Semitic. We have to talk about it, and we shouldn't be shy about it. Just in the same way that I would say in our own communities, if we hear someone say something that's racist, and we think it's like cute and funny, then or someone thinks it's cute and funny, I should say, we should make sure to educate that it's actually not funny. And here's why it's not funny. So that's the same thing I would do with Jewish people. They shouldn't be shy to say, hey, that's not funny. Okay. Yes, Dr. Shore, you got that right answer earlier, I see now.
Right.
Yes, Anne.
It seems to me that the farther we've gotten away from the Holocaust, the more we have anti-Semitic incidences. It seemed to me that right after the Holocaust, people were very careful about saying anything that was anti-Semitic or doing anything. And a lot of people, are Holocaust deniers. They don't even know it happened, or they don't, or they deny that it happened. But it seems to me that the memory has faded, and now what was taboo is okay.
It's a phenomenal point, Anne. And my one pushback to the point about the Holocaust is the year after the Holocaust was one of the worst pogroms ever in Kielce in Poland in 1946.
Well, that's Poland.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Poland wasn't done with us yet.
Okay. All right. But outside of that moment, I think you're pointing to another major challenge. We have to separate Holocaust education from anti-Semitism education. And here's why. This is, again, I'm giving you my take. You brought me in to hear my thoughts. This is my take. Other people would disagree, and that's fine. The problem with teaching about the Holocaust and not anti-Semitism is that the ultimate expression, the worst possible expression of anti-Semitism is the Holocaust. And if it's not the Holocaust, the world says, well, it's not really, is it really anti-Semitic? That gets to my point earlier. It's the same analogy is to say, just because slavery has been abolished, does that mean that racism doesn't exist? If we just talk about slavery, it's like, and I'm not trying to compare slavery to the Holocaust, different things, but I want to use those analogies. When I speak to non-Jewish audiences, I want to explain these analogies that racism can very much so exist. Just, we're not at the peak of it. We're not owning human beings. Okay, fair. And that's a helpful, I think I found that to be a helpful articulation. The second thing is then there's Jewish power now. Jewish power creates a different reality than the Jewish people have ever had. 48 was a theological and sociological dividing line. Mm-hmm. That's what happened. Jewish people in the first time in nearly 2,000 years had power. And the question was, how do we respond to power? And then the Jewish people became super successful in building up the state of Israel. And the way I view it is that the tax that you pay for success is criticism and often being attacked. That sort of thing can happen. And I think that that's what's happening. The Jewish people are, like I said, broadly speaking, doing well. There's still hate incidents. And people have to understand deeply, so that's the stat I said earlier. We have to make sure that it is front and center in Congress and have political activists working to end these sorts of things. Absolutely. Hear me clearly. Yes, yes, and yes. But that's, I'm like Dr. Shore in this way. Yes, my title is executive vice president. I lead what we do, but I'm the educational director. And I only think through the prism of education. And I don't have any other solution to the world's problems outside of education. I'm a one-trick pony. That's the only thing I know. And I think education, good education, thoughtful education, making sure it's in the Jewish schools, making sure it's in the schools that don't identify as Jewish, secular, non-denominational schools, learning about anti-Semitism, learning about the Holocaust, learning about all forms of hatred. Yeah, we got to do that. It has to happen in these schools.
Noam, I really have to echo what you're saying in terms of education, as of course, I would, but the fact of the matter is the fact that so many people on this screen, maybe they were just shy, didn't or don't remember the Soviet movement. Our kids, when I ask this question to them, really have absolutely, they certainly have no memory of it because they weren't around then. The power of that movement was so enormous, and our kids have absolutely no relationship to it. And so teaching them what you're describing is of key importance. But I want to ask you a question, and that is, what do you say to people who say you're overstating the case? I'm going to tell you that this Rosh Hashanah, this is a spoiler alert, Rabbi Wahlberg is going to be speaking about the fact that yes, there's anti-Semitism, but if you had asked anybody in Europe, they would have given their left arm to come live in Pikesville. Here we are living in a very, very affluent and comfortable experience for us, particularly here in America. How do you I know when you said ask people to raise their hands, how many of you have experienced anti-Semitism? I'm going to say, without knowing, and I think it's true, they were moderate experiences, or they were interpretive experiences, how our kids experience it on the ball field when other teams throw pennies on the you remember you've been
100%. Mount Carmel. Yep.
Remember that, and we experienced that. But when you talk about that, are we overreacting, and how do you respond to somebody who says, come on, you're just really very, very sensitive and you're overreacting, and don't read Rashi into everything that happens? And we live a very comfortable life in America. Don't overstate the case. How do you react to that, Noam?
I think that I would react to it in different ways. Way number one is I don't think that victim blaming is ever a wise educational or psychological approach. My sister-in-law was leaving my house in South Florida, and as she's leaving, I don't remember the exact thing that happened, but I remember, she's leaving the house, and I have Minion in my house, I have davening at my house, and she's walking down the street, and someone rolls down the window, puts out like some sort of Palestinian flag or whatever it was. I don't know exactly what it was. And this is a few months ago, and says something like, "You Jewish WHOR, blah, blah, blah." And like, that scared the living daylights out of her. Appropriately so, by the way. It scared her so much. And this is in, as people like to joke, the great free state of Florida, this is where that took place. Okay. And it's unnerving. We could hold two things at the same time to be simultaneously true. And it's very possible to do that. Yes, that's why I read those statistics. And I'll read them again. 60% of religious hate crimes happen to 2% of the population, Jews. 53% of Jews feel less safe than they did 5 years ago. On college campuses, 50% of Jews hide their identity. Okay? This is a reality. One of the things that we've done, and this is answering another question that someone else asked me, Beth asked me, is we made a film called Unsafe Spaces about the challenges young Jews face on campus. They're not prepared to talk about these sorts of things very often. I'm not speaking about Beth the Philip per se. I'm talking about the Jewish world. That's my audience, the Jewish world. And we have to teach them. We have to teach them the history. We have to teach them the different perspectives. We have to make sure that they have something else, though, that they have a thick Jewish identity. There is absolutely no substitute for that. So my answer to your question, Dr. Shore, is on the one hand, yes, there is rampant anti-Semitism. On the other hand, if I were to say that it is my lived experience day in, day out, that it's scary to be a Jew, and I'm a keep-a-wearing Jew. That's like that's my identity. I'm a keep-a-wearing Jew. I don't experience that. I do not experience that on a day-to-day sort of way. I'm one person. Other people do. So I'd never like to victim shame and to say that you should stop being sensitive. I wouldn't say that to people who are suffering in other ways ever. And I wouldn't say that to the Jewish people. What I would say educationally, however, is it shouldn't be our obsession. It shouldn't be our focus. And we shouldn't be like that hammer that always thinks that it sees a nail. We should also not do that. And we bring all that together. That's my take. Rena.
Hi, thank you so much. This has been fascinating. I was just curious. So I heard a term, it's probably you all have heard it, but being unapologetically Jewish. And I just love that term. And I think building the kids' self-confidence is so important, especially as they're going off to college campuses. And I was wondering, have you seen, or anyone in the audience seen, like any specific instruction for how do we teach our kids what to say when they witness something that's subtle and anti-Semitic, or are there programs teaching young people or even adults how to speak up without, I don't know, in a safe, diplomatic way?
Anybody have thoughts on that? You're raising it to the crowd. My mother, yes.
I'll wait for others.
Gary.
College campuses have changed drastically from when I went to school as to their, let's say, as to Judaism and how they accept Jewish students. Brandeis isn't the same Brandeis as when I went. So what schools, what colleges do you feel are better for students to go to nowadays that want to continue the Jewish identity and not be, let's say, face anti-Semitism or have to defend themselves all the time? And also, my second question is, what organizations should we politically or non-politically donate to that help, let's say, fight against anti-Semitism from your perspective?
Well, I on the second one, I would be the worst fundraiser in the world if I didn't say Open Door Media. And it's without a doubt, and you laugh, but it's without a doubt the most important global Jewish educational organization in the world, in my opinion. And it's providing the most Jewish education to the most people in the world. And that's, again, not an exaggeration. So
And
on the
Beth
history of
Tefillah.
anti-Semitism.
I can't believe you didn't say Beth Tefillah.
Well, of course, to your local institution first. Aniye Ircha Kodem, for sure. But in all seriousness, like I would pause and Rena, I'm not ignoring your question, but I want you to watch these videos. At the end of these videos, I think you're going to be able to say, okay, I have some suggestions. I have some solutions for how to talk about all of this. I have some suggestions for how to deal with a moment of apartheid week. One of my students, I call them my students, but they watch our YouTube content and reaches out to me. It's a kid named Max Makovsky from Muhlenberg College, and he tells me that there's he's at apartheid week and dealing with all these challenges there, and then there were these other group that came in and they started, like, this very right-wing pro-Israel group. They started fighting, and then they made it worse. They made them hate them. And he started searching on YouTube for what he balanced Israel content, found our content. And then he went in there and had a thoughtful conversation, and it totally lowered the temperature. That's my suggestion, Rena. My suggestion is lowering the temperature. My suggestion is rising above the noise. My way of life is to be curious, is to express curiosity. And if somebody is a hater, then you don't have to engage them. But the way I view it is most people are complicated, and they're somewhere in between. And if they could be approached as a human being, you could have a conversation. Gary, to answer your question about college and university, you're not going to like this answer, but if I was Richard Joel or Ari Berman, I'd be like, are you kidding me? Like, there is a university that is literally created for this very purpose. It's called Yeshiva University. Now, I'm not saying that everyone should be sending to Yeshiva University and to Stern. I'm not going to make that argument. It's probably good for as many Jewish people to consider those universities. But every single one of these universities, I went to USC to get my doctorate. It wasn't the most welcoming place to my Judaism. It wasn't. I had probably some anti-Semitic moments there. I know, questionable, but very uncomfortable. It's like, listen, this is what it is. I almost like, I'm going to make a pretty broad comment here, and maybe it's a little intense, but I think it's okay for us to not feel so comfortable in every single university in every single moment, in the sense that like we're in galut, and if we believe that, then it's not going to be perfect at University of Maryland. It's not going to be perfect at Penn. It's going to be pretty darn good. It's going to be pretty darn good at these universities and these Hillels that are set up to deal with these things, and these Chabads that are unbelievable. It's pretty good infrastructure. But is it going to be, are there times that we feel like the other? Yes, because we are the other. There is one nation state in which we are not the other. That's Medinat Yisrael.
I do have to agree with you that we are in Galut. And so, yes, we are, and that's why it was called Aver. That's why we're called Ivri. But bringing you in to speak to our kids, and this is not a commercial for Beth Tefillah, it's really a commercial for education and what Noam was saying earlier. Bringing you in to talk to our kids, our seniors particularly, before they go out onto the college campus is absolutely critical. And I would say to you, if you have, and it was so powerful, if you have children or grandchildren who are in schools, private schools, public schools, who need to have this conversation, I will tell you that those schools will be open to suggestion of a speaker who can talk to those kids. And I would say to you, although Noam doesn't have a lot of time, maybe somebody on his staff does, try to spread the word in terms of education, in terms of exposure of our kids before they go to college, so that they are prepared and they're armed. And I hate to use that word, but that's what they need to be. They need to be armed with the right answers.
They need to be armed with the answers, but they really need to have a thick Jewish identity.
Yes,
and that's what it is. Like the thicker the Jewish identity, the less likely it becomes difficult when the more confidence you have, the easier it's get that dirt off your shoulder. It's just like, it's okay, it's fine. The thinner the identity, then it's very sensitive and vulnerable, exactly. So that's what you have to build it up. And yes, Dr. Short, I gotta say that those 3 days that I spent at Beth Tefillah were remarkable with your students. I'm in touch with those students for those 3 days. One of those students now became a writer for us at Unpacked before she goes to when she's at university. It's like, this is how we do stuff. This is how we have to be building this up from the ground up with the institution like Beth Tefillah, with our content. And there is one of the things I like to say, and again, it's harsh, but I don't mind it. There are no shortcuts. There are no shortcuts. We have to have this Jewish education. Sherry.
So one of the things, and again, I'm going to make my plug for Beth Tefillah and why it's different and why it gives a different strength. Because Beth Tefillah teaches Jews to love Jews. And you feel stronger when you have a bigger community and you have a bigger backbone. So the fact that you have not decided that your Jewish community is only these people and discount other Jews, it gives you a whole different sense of your Judaism and who the Jewish people are. That you
Sherry, I agree with that tremendously. And you spent, decades forming those communities for us at Beth Tefillah, but also with all these other schools. And then when you have other schools get together and these relationships that develop from one school to another school, to Canada, to Kansas, to wherever, then you feel like you're part of something a little bit bigger. Without a doubt, it's a thick Jewish identity. I forgot who came up with that term, but that's what it is. It's a thick Jewish identity that emerges from community, from engagement, from learning. And then these things are still bothersome, but then they're just bothersome. And then the people that need to really work on themselves, it's not the Jew that needs to solve anti-Semitism. It's the non-Jew. Let's remember that. Okay, with that, I am going to go to my baby
if
daughter.
There are no other questions. Are there other questions? Noam, where are you heading?
I got to go to my daughter, my 3-month-old. So
Mazal tov.
Thank you. And
Thank
Maishi,
you all for participating, for listening, and for being part of an important conversation. Because unless we educate ourselves, we can't educate others. Unless we ourselves strengthen our Jewish identity, we can't strengthen the Jewish identity of the people around us. And that's really what we're all about. We are not an island, no matter what the world feels like. The only me community. We are not an island. We are part of a community, and that's really
That's right.
important. Yeshikoach. No, I'm doing.
Koyach.